Welcome back. It's episode 14 on the Holocene podcast. Today we're with Joey Lott. Joey is a teacher and mentor and has coached hundreds of people to reach their full potential. He helps his clients to take back their lives and to understand themselves on a deeper level. I wanted to get Joey on the show today because I think his message is incredibly powerful. And in this interview, we unpack a lot of his teachings. So I hope you enjoy. And as always, please like, subscribe, and share. It really does help the channel out. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. Recently found you on YouTube and really kind of delved into your work. I find it really interesting. I was quite interested to find out sort of what led you to where you're at now in your journey and what your kind of overall message is.
Well, I think in a nutshell, the answer to that is suffering. I mean, I'll try to spare you the terrible details, but if I was to give an overview, I would characterize it now as an energy management problem for a long time. I experienced very intense energy, and I didn't know how to understand that, and so I thought it was anxiety. And so that anxiety grew worse over time. I would say I first noticed it when I was in my early teens. And then by the time I was in my early 20s, it was extremely severe. And so I was trying to manage it in all kinds of ultimately unsuccessful ways that all had to do with outer focus, trying to change my circumstances, because I thought that my circumstances were the cause of my anxiety. You know, first I thought it was something to do with, I thought my anxiety was because of the way my body looked. So I thought if I could change the way my body looked, then that would solve the problem. That didn't work. Then I thought it was my environment. I thought that the environment that I lived in was somehow hostile to calmness and peace. You know, it was always something. Yeah. It was like too stimulating in some way. And so I was constantly trying to manage that, and that failed very badly because that just made things much worse. And so by the time I was 31, I had basically run my life into the ground. You know, I had been on the face of it, I think, according to some people's standards, I don't know, some people's, not all people's standards, I had been fairly successful. At least I was successful financially. I was very prosperous and had a very successful career. I was a web developer and did very, very well. And by the time I was 31, I had my own agency, and so that was great. But the anxiety was such that I couldn't manage it. My life was totally unmanageable. So I ended up homeless, you could say, not because I was destitute, but homeless because I couldn't find a home that was suitable. So I was desperately driving around the US trying to find something. And at one point I determined that maybe I needed to just have some sort of breakthrough, some sort of macho breakthrough. So I decided to spend the winter of 2009, 2010 in northern Wisconsin, which, for those who don't know where that is or the environmental conditions, it's extremely cold. It's the nights can get down to -40, which is the same in Celsius and Fahrenheit. It's very cold. And I was living outside, trying to prove something to myself and break free of my suffering, whatever I thought it was. And that didn't work either. But I survived it. So things got, in some ways, I would say it was a turning point of sorts, but not in some sort of heavens parting miraculous kind of way. It was more subtle than that. I think it kind of knocked some sense into me a little bit and helped me to realize that I was approaching things wrong. And
was you into any sort of spirituality at that
oh
point?
yeah. So I think so. I've always been, even as a child, and then when I was in my early 20s, I was I first started out in there's an organization called the Church of Religious Science that's based in Los Angeles, California, which is where I lived at that time. And I was studying to be a practitioner within that organization, and it's a new thought, part of a new thought movement, which I don't know how much of that made its way to the UK, but it was fairly big in the United States for a while, in maybe like late 1800s, early 1900s was its heyday. It was sort of like Christian Science and Unity. There were a whole bunch of these movements that were loosely affiliated, and it was a lot of law of attraction kind of stuff. And so I was into that, and then I got into transcendental meditation, which in hindsight I think greatly exacerbated my energy problem because that was when the anxiety really took off. Prior to that it was somewhat manageable, not really, but somewhat. After that it was a nightmare. It was really, really awful.
I think a lot of times where people go into, I'm just going to bracket it as sort of new agey type of
Sure.
type of stuff, unless you know what you're doing, it can lead you down all sorts of cul-de-sacs, and it can be, I think, even going into the level, I've spoken on this channel about this with a guy called Mark Windows, kind of demonic energy and going into sorts of realms as well. So, but where you are now, I mean, what I like about you is you seem incredibly grounded, and I'm sure we'll get into this in the conversation, but your message is that of someone who's made all the mistakes, been down all the roads, and is like, do you know what? I'm glad I did all of this, but I've actually realized there's a lot more of a simpler, straightforward way that's actually based in reality, as opposed to, when you get into these transcendental meditations. And, I traveled India for a bit a few years ago, and I was really into that sort of stuff. And I didn't feel grounded. I felt very, it was a very different energy.
Yeah, it depends. So to be totally transparent and fair, I have a foot in both worlds, so to speak. So it's not that I abandoned the transcendental, but definitely, without a doubt, it has to be grounded, or it doesn't work. Because what I have learned subsequently is that, and again, this is viewing it through the lens of energy. You could view it in other ways, but from an energetic perspective, we could say that the totality has a through line of energy from the uppermost echelons to the lowermost realms, and it has to be entirely connected. And if it's not, then you've got big problems. And so certainly if people are trying to ascend without being grounded, that's going to be bad news. And it's going to lead to potentially really terrible problems. I mean, I think in my case, I became aware I think when I was around 19, I had an experience that made me realize that I had taken LSD, and I had a realization that was incredibly dangerous, because I saw that it opened people up to things that they might not be ready for, including potential what you could call negative entities, who could take possession if one is not protected. And so I had the realization in that moment that I had protection. It wasn't like I didn't create the protection. By grace, I had received protection. And so, again, if somebody is just trying to ascend without being grounded, then they could be opening themselves up to all kinds of bad stuff, and and that could be very difficult to get out of.
Yeah, I had a situation myself. I spoke about it on this channel actually. I did DMT 3 times, which was actually great. I'm going to be honest, that was a good experience.
Sure.
But I experimented with mushrooms, and I went into one trip with the intention of trying to figure out what life is all about and what happens when you die.
Oh, yeah.
And oh my God, I wish I was warned. I mean, I ended up in what can only be described as like a death loop. It was, yeah, and it felt like it went on forever.
Yeah.
I read before that if you have like higher dose of vitamin C, it can sort of help bring you down. So I've got loads of oranges, and I'm in the trip, and I've cut one of the oranges. I sliced straight into my hand.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, and the world's melting around. Oh, it was horrendous. It probably took me about 2 months to kind of get myself together.
Yeah.
And yeah, you've got to be incredibly careful, I think, with things like that. I thought I was open enough to deal with it. As I say, like I don't necessarily regret it, but I think that there's ways to, go inwards and learn about yourself and how, this realm works, and, to go on this journey without having to take anything that's as extreme as that.
I agree with you. I think it's much better, in fact, and much faster, because as I described, for me, a multi-decade detour in anxiety and worsening my state. Whereas, hypothetically, had I been grounded from the get-go, then it would have been smooth and I would have been much further along in my journey.
Can I ask, in terms of your anxiety, was it like health anxiety, or was it something that you could put your finger on, or was it just a kind of general?
Well, it was a general sense of fear of, you could say health anxiety. Yeah, that would be one way to describe it. But it was just a sort of a fear of something bad happening. And I never knew what it was exactly. I came up with all kinds of crackpot theories about it along the way, but I never knew what it was.
Yeah. And I've been through a similar thing to yourself. Mine was a lot more recent. Mine was around the COVID times. And I still worry a little bit the amount of energy I gave to my anxiety, whether it was around, the Great Reset thing, or the whole situation that played out, or health anxiety, watching people take the solution. We don't have to mention what that is, but watching family and friends, panic with the whole pandemic, and it really created a negative feeling for me, and it manifested itself into health anxiety as well, which I have dealt with now. But I do sometimes worry, when you do put a lot of energy into things, like energy flows where thought goes, or and you start to look at this whole thing around manifestation, and you can influence your reality from the inside out, reflecting back. So sometimes I do worry, all of that energy I put out there negatively, has it have I dealt with that karma yet, or is it still on its way to me? I bet you kind of went through a similar thought process when you start to realize that you really do have to guard the gate and be careful of what you do put your emotions into in the way of thought.
This is true. Yeah. No doubt. And I guess so traditionally, what you're talking about there is described traditionally in Indian thought is it's karma, right? So it's, there's cause and effect. So your thought, your feeling is, your imagination is the cause, and then the effect is what you experience on the outside. And so traditionally, karma is categorized in a variety of ways, and one of those is what's called prarabdha karma. So prarabdha karma, they're likened to an arrow on a bow. Okay, so you could have some karmas that are just like you've just got the arrow and the bow, so it hasn't really gone anywhere. Then you've got some where you've actually, strung it and you're ready to shoot, but you haven't shot. That's a different kind. So it hasn't gone anywhere, but there's more potential in it. And then there's prarabdha karma. You shot it. It's going to hit somewhere, and it's going to hit you. I mean, it always comes back to you. So so prarabdha karma is the kind that you could be legitimately concerned about. The others you should not be legitimately concerned about, but prarabdha karma, you do need to be, if you view any concern as legitimate, that would be legitimate concern, because the effects will come to you. The secret, though, if you want to know the secret for dealing with that, is that it can only strike something. So if there's nothing there for it to strike, then there's no problem. And so what is it that it's striking, right? If you've got this arrow that's been shot and it's going to come back and hit something, what is it that it's going to hit? And what it's going to hit, if you take a look, is really just a bundle of other, it's a bundle of identity. It's a bundle of memory, a bundle of impressions that has been, that's being held together by something. And that something is the sense that this is mine. So the trick there is, if you want to release all of that fear and anxiety, is you let go of clinging to the bundle, and then there's nothing for it to strike. So the experience might come back, right? Like the arrow will come back, and there will be some sort of ephemeral sense of something happening, but there's no lasting effect because it hasn't actually impacted anything. The reason that most of the time the karma is problematic, if it is problematic, I mean, sometimes it could be positive, right? But if it's problematic, it's because it strikes something which then has a reflexive reaction, which sets into motion something of the same kind, right? So fear begets more fear. If you've shot an arrow of fear and it comes back and hits you, chances are it's going to trigger more fear in you, which is going to cause you to set off another arrow of fear, which will come back and hit you again, which is what I was describing earlier from my own experience, right? Worsening anxiety. But if it comes back, if the arrow of fear comes back and there's nothing for it to strike, then there's no reaction to set into motion further fear. And so then there's freedom. That's actually the trick.
It's almost detaching yourself from the outcome.
Sure, yeah, because that's all that's ever happening anyway, is if you have an attachment to this identity, then when this arrow hits you, so to speak, then what it does is it triggers in you the similar kind of impressions, like memories, thoughts, feelings, that then, because you have an attachment to and you're projecting into the future, then you react to it and you're like, oh no, that's going to happen, I need to do something, and then you're sending out the fear again. Whereas if it just hits and there's just this sort of reverberation of that past fear, what actually it does is it releases all of those impressions, and so there's a kind of liberation there. I don't know why Skype just keeps doing these things. I don't know if you're noticing the sound, like the bloop, but I don't know how to turn it off.
No, it's not coming through on my side.
Okay, good.
It might not come through on the recording, which is
Good.
Okay, so like I said, I love your message. It's very much one of hope. Talking a lot about really understanding what it is you want. Don't suppress desire. If you have a certain desire, you have to accept it, and you really need to kind of align yourself with essentially trying to manifest what you really want. And I don't think that, I think in a lot of sort of spiritual circles, and a lot of the Eastern religions, they talk a lot about suppressing, say if you want to be rich, some people just want to be rich. It is what it is. And I don't think that we should look at it in sort of dirty terms. I think, there's an acceptance of this reality in this world we live in. And I don't see why you can't practice your spiritual practice and live within the real world and have that sort of balance. You also talk a lot about, remaining focused. So if you're setting out for something, you have to stay the course. You have to stay on the point. And something else that you talk about as well, which really resonated with me actually, and it's something I've really been focused on recently, is I almost kind of try to lean into what it is I want. So let's just say I want to double my wage. I don't know, whatever it may be. And you notice that fear starts to pop up, these gut sinking feelings of, oh my God, if I have more money, then it's more stress, or it means I might have to work more hours, whatever it may be, whatever the ego is going to, or the paradigm, whatever we want to call it, is going to throw in front of you to pull you back to your comfort zone. And just sort of, what I got from your message is really to sort of acknowledge that, but don't, you have to kind of look beyond that, as opposed to getting wrapped up in the fear. And I've noticed in the past, if I set a target, I can easily convince myself along the way to lower my, what it is that I'm trying to achieve, because I'm really convincing myself to go back into my comfort zone. And do you mind sort of just talking a little bit about that and your sort of message as a whole? I know you break down each individual parts on your various different videos, but yeah, do you mind just kind of going into that as a brief and sort of putting out your philosophy around that?
Sure. Well, so broadly speaking, to provide the context, I would say that I view that there are two parts, and I liken them to two sides of a coin. So there's only one coin, right? Well, you can't have a one-sided coin, but it appears that there are two sides. So for us, there's also two sides. There's only one reality, one self, but it appears to have two sides. One we could call the unmanifest, the other we could call manifest. And it's my experience and my belief that we're all here to know ourselves in our totality. Anything less than that won't be satisfying, so we'll keep seeking. Now, some of the Eastern thought or Eastern religions that you were referring to, not all, but some of them do tend to focus somewhat exclusively on the unmanifest, because that's the view is that the manifest realm is full of suffering, that it's inevitable, unavoidable, and therefore the only solution is to escape it into the unmanifest, the source, which is called various names, right? You could call it Brahman or Nirvana. It depends on how the individuals are perceiving it. But so from that perspective, then all desire is seen as problematic, because it sucks you back into this limited identity that is the cause of all suffering. Well, my own experience with that, because I attempted that path, was that it was disastrous. And I think that, to be fair, there may be some people for whom that is what's needed, because maybe they've already completed the other side, but they haven't yet completed this side. So it's like we get a distorted view because we see some monk, and that monk seems to be really content and happy and peaceful and fulfilled. And we say, oh, well, then that must be the way. Like, everybody needs to be celibate and reclusive and just meditate all day long. But if you view it through the lens of past lives, we could say that monk's soul already did the work. They were already in a past life. They already had the complete fulfillment in the manifest realm. Like they had that success. What they didn't have was this other side, so they had to complete that. Whereas for most of us, it's a little bit of both. And so I view that for the majority of us, certainly anybody who's not a monk living in a cave, we need a little bit of both. We need that balance.
Yeah.
And so I, because of my past experiences, I leaned more heavily toward the unmanifest, and was out of balance in terms of manifest, and hence I had a lot of personal problems. I was trying to avoid my personal problems by going into the unmanifest, and it certainly works so long as one is in that unmanifest state. So there are techniques that one can do or learn that will allow one to enter into that unmanifest state, and there's complete absolution of all problems. It's just totality, oneness, bliss, peace, freedom, which is fantastic, but is not integrated, because then inevitably one comes back into the world and it's like, oh, I still have all the same problems. Nothing got better.
So in a sense, it's probably one of the better ways of escape, but it is escape nonetheless.
Yeah, well, and it generates more imbalance ultimately, because at least my experience was that having those tastes of that of that potential, right, of total peace. I mean, not just relative peace, not just like I'm feeling relaxed, but absolute peace, no possibility of any problem ever, total bliss. Then all of a sudden to come back and it's like, whoa, all these problems. That's a big contrast.
Yeah.
And so I've learned, again, the hard way, that it's very important to have that balance. And if I have problems in my worldly life, I need to address them. And I need to address them in a balanced way, which draws upon both realms and the wisdom of both realms. Because like I was mentioning, if I have a fear problem, let's say, then it's very difficult to resolve that fear problem as long as the fear is coming back to me and it's triggering more fear. How am I going to solve that? Well, if I know that I have the ability to access peace and freedom and spaciousness now, then it allows for a liberation of that vicious cycle. So that's very powerful. However, then I also need to, because it creates sort of a vacuum there, right? There's a void now that needs to be filled in my manifest experience. Well, I need to fill that consciously with what I want. Otherwise, fear is going to come back again. So I need to be clear. Okay, what do I want? I want safety. Okay, so focus on safety. Manifest safety in this life.
Yeah, I think for me personally, if you're experiencing fear or anxiety, as uncomfortable as it is, I think the best thing that you can do is to really kind of lean into that and try to understand, why do I feel this way? And let's say the worst case scenario plays out. What's the worst that will happen? And almost shedding light on that fear, which is easier said than done. But I feel if you are, avoiding it at all, or pretending that like running from it essentially, and it is just going to grow. And it's only when you shed light on things and you understand that you can overcome those fears. And that's kind of what I did with my anxiety. There was other aspects. There was there was environmental factors as well. It was a stressful time. We was in and out of lockdowns and everyone's fighting each other and all of this. So there was that as well. But I think essentially it's quite important probably to sort of lean into that and ask yourself, why is it that I feel this way. And I think there's a lot of growth in doing that. In terms of, as you say, replace the negative with a positive, and really kind of home in on what you actually want, and then try to set the course and focus your energy on that. Do you do a lot around sort of visualization as well, or?
Well, it certainly is valuable, but I'm not particularly visual. So some people are more visual than others. I'm not one of those people, so it's not. I don't depend upon it too heavily, and I don't tend to emphasize that so much when I'm speaking with people. But certainly, if somebody is naturally visualistic, then it can be sensible to lean into that. Take advantage of that, because it can be very valuable. The most so from my perspective, all experience is, well, just take a step back. I agree with you in a sense when you're saying that some analysis is necessary in order to deconstruct those negative patterns, those unhelpful patterns. Awareness around what is it really, because it's like you can be scared of the monster in the closet as long as there's no light on. Once the light is on, you see there's no monster in the closet, so you can't be afraid of the monster in the closet anymore. And so most of our fears are like that. We don't really know exactly what it is. In fact, I would say all of our fears are like that. We don't know exactly what it is, because if we did know exactly what it was, we wouldn't be afraid. We'd see it for what it is. Like there's probably it's a fairly famous metaphor that's used, the snake and the rope. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody who's not familiar with it, briefly, a man is traveling. He enters into a place to stay at dusk, and he lies down, and then he looks over in the corner and he sees what he's convinced is a snake, coiled and ready to strike. And so he's terrified all night. He can't fall asleep. He's shaking. He doesn't want to move. And when dawn comes, he realizes, oh, it was a rope. And so we have to be able to see what it is, because when we see what it is, then we know it's not the thing that we were afraid of. So I would definitely say that, from my view, we want to gain knowledge about what it is that we're afraid of, and see what it actually is, because we'll see that really what it's composed of, at least my experience is, it's composed of these components that are they're inner subjective phenomena, that, like, it's our senses, it's our thoughts, and all that combines to form our imagination. And then we project that outwardly, and we say, oh, there's this thing out there that's going to get me.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, it's nearly always the fear of the unknown with a sprinkle of my imagination on top.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Because the imagination is what gives it that sense of reality. So all of the things that we experience are actually our imagination only. And so when we do that deconstruction and we take a look and see, okay, whatever this is that I'm afraid of, it really is just, I'm feeling this feeling, and then maybe there are some mental images that I'm calling memories to give them a sense of substance, because they say, oh, a memory is something that happened in the past, but actually the memory is just the use of the imagination presently with a thought that says it's from the past, to give it more sense of substance. So you take those things, combine, the thought, the memory, the use of imagination, and then the feeling, and all of a sudden you have what you call reality. I mean, every experience consists of those things only. And so so you can use that knowledge both to deconstruct what you don't want, and then to construct what you do want, because if you have that understanding, then it's just a matter of repeating those components of what you do want to whatever degree you can. So bringing it back to what you asked about visualization, if a person is visualistic, they can certainly make use of that. But the imagination, we use the word imagination, which suggests that it's all images, it's all visual, but really it's kind of recruiting all of the senses to create an impression of something that we would consider to be real. And then it has to be infused with a feeling to give it a sense that it really is real. It's like if you were just watching a movie without any sound, it doesn't seem as real. You know, if it's at a distance from you, on a small screen, it doesn't seem as real. But if it's, you know, surround screen, big screen, and loud surround sound and everything, it's like more immersive. It causes you to jump when the surprises happen more. And so our experiences like that, the more that we can recruit all of the senses, all of those components that make our reality consciously, the more we have the ability to consciously choose our experience.
So with the visualization thing, so I've tried all the different types. I did the silver mind control method and got into Neville Goddard and all of this sort of stuff over the years. But what I found to be the most effective for me, minus the fear aspect, which I'll go into in a second, we've sort of just spoke about, is to almost sort of believe it's here and now. So say if I want, you know, I don't know, to double my earnings, I'll almost kind of walk and talk and act like I've already got it without bankrupting myself. You know, I don't want to.
Well, there's some
too crazy, but you know, if I'm out for dinner, maybe I will pay the bill, maybe I won't. But in my head, I'm kind of like, yeah, I paid that. I'll pay that for everyone. You know, just those types of thoughts, and to really kind of go with that in my waking life, and almost kind of fake it to yourself in a way. And I found that worked quite powerfully for me. But with the fear thing, and the reason that I wanted to speak about that, I feel if you are fearful and if you have any sort of anxiety, especially like most people that have anxiety, it's not sort of just a little bit and a bit here and a bit there. It sort of comes out of nowhere and it can absolutely swamp your whole day. Sometimes your week, your month, and a lot of the time you don't know where it begins and where it ends. It's just, you're just drowning in this anxious feeling. Looking back over the last couple of years, I'm kind of pointing my finger at that and thinking, how can I progress my life when I'm wasted, not wasting, but I'm using so much energy in that battle. So for me now, it's like, before you start dreaming too far ahead, deal with those problems that you've got now, and try to you know, conserve that energy really, because if you've got a bucket with a big hole in it, anxiety in the hole almost, you're never going to fill the bucket. So fill the hole, deal with that. I know, again, it's easier said than done, but I think once you sort of deal with that side, you then just naturally have more energy to put into what it is you want, and then you can really start to repeat those thoughts, as I said, whether it is visualization or just living it each day. And I'd imagine at any level of fear that you do have, it could probably zap a lot of that creative energy.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, fear is the enemy. Because you nailed it. I mean, fear is going to drain all of your energy. You've got, I mean, all of this is energy. It's all energy. I mean, it's what, light, sound, it's sensation, thought waves. It's all energy. And so if you're not able to manage your energy, it's a lost cause. You can't do anything successfully. You're just going to be trapped in the same cycle. And fear definitely is the main energy drain. I mean, there are others. This is why forgiveness is so powerful and important, because if you're holding on to resentment, you're ruining your life. I mean, you have to be willing to forgive for your sake, right? It has nothing to do with anybody else. It's just to do with you, because you don't want to ruin your life anymore. So there are other energy drains, but fear is a huge one. Fear is the one, or maybe it's just me personally, but I think in general, fear is probably the number one energy drain that ruins people's lives. And so I agree with you that has to be addressed. And I agree with you that it has to be, well, you didn't say this exactly. You said that you maybe said something slightly different. You said that you found that for manifesting what you want, acting now as though it's already true is very powerful for you. And I agree with you for sure. I mean, for most people, it's challenging to get to that point. So starting in their imagination is better because it's more doable, and it will lead to that result as long as a person persists. But I would actually argue, and I don't know that you said otherwise, but I would argue that using that same knowledge, insight, is the way to address the fear problem as well. Because as long as the fear is something that you're going to resolve in the future, then you just have the fear until the future, but the future never arrives, so you're just stuck with the fear. So you've got to address it now. And like you're using the metaphor of a bucket with a hole in it, so you got to stop the hole using that metaphor. And what I was suggesting earlier is the way that I would metaphorically stop the hole, which is to say, look, what's happening right now that I'm calling fear, I'm going to use my intelligence and just look and tell the truth, which is I've been stuck in this pattern. I've been having crackpot theories about what this is and how I'm going to address it, but it never gets better. So the only way that I'm going to possibly solve this is something radically different. And that's going to be to take a look right now and see fundamentally, what is it that I'm actually afraid of? I've got all kinds of theories, but really fundamentally, I'm afraid that something's going to destroy me. And so I got to take a look and see, what is this me that I'm so afraid of being destroyed? And if I can see in this moment that me is just another mental construct, then I'm able to actually stop the behavior that I'm doing that is producing the experience that I'm calling fear, because that fear is really just a sensation that I'm producing through some inner behavior. It's usually tension, right? I mean, if you're feeling afraid, you're tense. And your mind says, well, I can't let go of that tension because there's something that's going to get me. But if I look and I see, okay, there's no me that's going to be gotten here. Or at the very least, I'm not sure that I can find one, so I've got to be willing to risk something here and just let go of the tension for a second. If I do that, then all of a sudden that hole is stopped and I'm no longer leaking my energy, and I can start to put that to what I want. Before that, it's all just being drained into fear. But that split second that I can do that, and it's usually not something we can sustain for a long time, right? It literally is just a split second. But if I do that repeatedly, I get better at it. So I start to shorten that time window when I'm stuck in fear, right? Like at first I'm stuck in fear for a decade. And then I get to a point where it's like, okay, just for a month. And then I get to a point where it's just for a day. And then it's like just for a minute.
Yeah. So give yourself permission sometimes to delay the fear, delay the anxiety. I'll worry about that later. Let me just enjoy this moment. And
so, yeah, let go of the tension, let go of that apprehension, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And just because, again, it's all feeding into that negative imagination, the fearful feeling coupled with the fearful imagination. And now I'm thinking that's real. I'm looking around. Where is it? What's going to get me? I'm certain it's there.
Yeah.
But if for this moment right now, if I say, look, I'm just going to risk it. I'm going to just let go of the tension. Then I can start to realize, well, in this one instant, just for a split second, I'm okay.
Yeah.
The next second, maybe I tense up again and I say, oh, where is it? It's going to get me. But that 1 second proves to me that there's another possibility. And then if I repeat that, then that old fear pattern, it doesn't have as much substance to it anymore. So it's like the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And it might take some time for it to totally unwind, but if you persist in it, it works for sure.
One thing that helped me a lot is going to the present moment and just acknowledging that I am safe. Like,
correct.
I'm worried about whatever the future holds, but right now,
yeah,
I am safe.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong right now. And
yeah.
then the more you visit that space, the more you start to realize, that you start to detach from those theories and those fears that you have. I'd imagine a lot of people are like me in the sense of what I've recently discovered is that a lot of my fears are actually around like how far I can go in my life in the sense of the positive. So I'm actually kind of scared of the positive, which is when I sort of figured that out, I was like, that's just mental. But it's almost like if I think of being happy in the future, I book like me and my missus, we're getting married next year and we've just booked our honeymoon in Sri Lanka. And we're really excited, but immediately I got this overbearing feeling of, well, imagine if I'm ill before I go, or if I lose my job and I have no money and we can't afford to, and it's like, I've started to realize that. And I'm like, imagine if that doesn't happen. And imagine if I go and actually have a great time. But these all kind of thoughts and worries, you're probably, if you're aware of it, you start to acknowledge that actually does happen. And sometimes you're tripping yourself up and finding reasons to not be happy in the future as well. So earlier you the fear and the worry of everything bad that can happen, you're also getting in the way of positive things.
Yeah, correct. Well, one trick that I found is helpful for that is just to brainwash yourself by telling yourself over and over and over and over and over until you start to see it, that everything that happens in my life is for my greatest good. The reason that I find that this so powerful is because it really undoes all of it solves that problem, right? So if the mind says, oh, but what if this, what if that, then if you have this other program installed that says, yes, but everything that happens in my life is for my greatest good, it doesn't matter what happens. You see, it's like, so you go to Sri Lanka and you have an amazing time, that's for your greatest good. You get sick beforehand and don't go, that's for your greatest good. No matter what happens, it's for your greatest good, so you're all good.
Yeah, no, I like that. What I was doing, which is kind of similar, but I guess something I just conjured up myself is, say for instance something's going to happen in the future. I'll deal with that at the time with the knowledge that I then have.
Yeah,
I'm not going to worry about it now because the circumstances that lead to that event may give me more data and information and growth. So I'll be strong enough to deal with it then, just like I'm strong enough to deal with whatever happens now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really powerful. And it's true.
I prefer yours because that's just reaffirming, it is what it is. And I think that's a really mellow way to look at it. But
well, they're synergistic. They work really well together. I mean, what you're doing is very powerful. I agree. It's awesome.
Yeah. So just kind of knowing and reaffirming to yourself that I'm here where I am now, and I know what I know now, and whatever happens in the future, trust, because if I look back at my whole life, I've got 35 years of data and proof of this. I will be able to deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a very important point, because again, the fear is always, I won't be up to the task and I'll be destroyed. But when you tell the truth, which you just did, it's like, I survived. I did it. So it's going to be fine, actually.
Yeah. Is it when you sort of had this discovery? So fast forward into, when you had the penny drop and the epiphany, and you no longer lived in fear, and you started to really kind of focus on crafting your, your philosophy and what you now teach and what you help, to guide others with. So you've dropped the fear, you've overcome it by, different strategies that have just made you realize that it's all for my greater good, and it'll all work out in the end. So now you've eliminated that. If another analogy is like you're driving a Ferrari, but you've got an elephant tied to the back. You've dropped the elephant. Now you're in this sports car, and you're like, I no longer have the fear. I have an understanding of how this reality works. I've seen myself manifest or materialize, my desires into my reality. Is that really when you started to live, to live that life and start to dream and dare to kind of think of the bigger goals? And
well, in my case, it was a little bit different. It was more that we could say I dropped the fear. I'm not sure exactly what to say about that, but we'll just for now call it dropping the fear. So huge sense of liberation. This was maybe around 2012, 2013, in that time period. And so I was just viewing everything through that lens. I just thought, look, that's it. I mean, if you just drop the fear, just be fully present to whatever's happening without giving any particular attention to any of the thoughts about any of it. It's just flow. It's all awesome. It's not. So I wasn't at all concerned about the future at all. I didn't have any thought about the future. I didn't care at all. I was only in the present, so to speak. And so that was fantastic and liberating, but there were, I guess, two problems with it. One was that when I was coaching other people, their results were pretty limited because I think a lot of people weren't ready to do that. It's different than most people are living. It's so radically different that people just can't really adjust to it very easily. So people were not getting great results when I was coaching them in that. The second problem was that so I have 3 children. I'm married. I have 3 children, and so my family wants things. I'm like, I don't care at all. I'm so happy. I'll just sit anywhere. I don't care. I'll sit on a mountaintop in the winter, freeze. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I mean, like, the sensations will be there. There will be thoughts that will be there. There'll be reactions that occur, but fundamentally, I don't care because I know that everything is absolutely fine. But my family wants things, and then I still have an attachment to my family, so I want my family to be happy. So I'm sort of getting unhappy because my family's wanting things that I'm not feeling able to provide for them, because I'm just wanting to, just hang out and just be. So I went through another journey then. It's like, okay, how do I find this balance where I can be in both worlds fully, not just on the border, not just over here in the unmanifest, not just on the border where I'm not invested in either, not fully over here in the manifest, losing myself, like totality. How can I do that? And that took me a while. And it's only maybe in the last couple of years that that's really started to come to fruition. And so that's what I'm about these days, and people seem to get much better results because I see, look, I meet people where they are. And so I can see now when people, I help people to find out what they really want. And then I see where they are, because you can only start where you are. You can't start somewhere else. And so, if the person's, sometimes a person is really struggling with money, okay? Like money is a big problem for them. And they're stressing about money all the time. And then they think that the solution is that they're going to do a lot of Vipassana retreats. And like, that's not going to work, actually, because you're still stressing about the money. Like that's a big drain. You're not going to get the benefits of the Vipassana retreats because you're not achieving this balance. So for you, we've got to focus more on the money. Like what's going on there? What are you believing? We need to clear that stuff away, help you to focus on what you want, visualizing it, feeling it, starting to manifest it so you experience more calm, peace, stability in your life, greater confidence. Then you want to do Vipassana retreats? Awesome. But from a totally different place, right? So you can start to get the benefits in a balanced way. So I just meet people.
For the low-hanging fruit, deal with that.
Yeah, you have to.
Look at it, yeah.
Because again, that's what I realized in my own life. It's like, okay, this is great. I discovered this liberation, but that liberation didn't turn out to be fully sustainable because I had this attachment to my family. I wasn't willing yet to give that up. And so I needed to find a way to ground everything into a total reality, not just some part of reality. It had to be the whole shebang. And so that's the lens I look at now, is meeting people where they're at, seeing what their needs are. You call it low-hanging fruit. Getting that sorted out, taking one step at a time, and achieving a balanced, complete, satisfying life that includes knowledge of the total self as pure consciousness and as an individuated self who wants to live an awesome life with a particular purpose.
Yeah, that's definitely what I get from you when I talk to you. And that's what I got when I come across your YouTube channel. That's why I wanted to reach out, because there is a lot of unbalance. I live between the two. One side of me is I like to have a nice car. I like to dress well. I like to, I feel I need a career. I gave that up once and I lived this more, kind of spiritual lifestyle where I wasn't chasing the money and I had more time and more freedom. And I ended up just creating another prison in my mind. And then I started to feel like I was behind on the money side of things. I'm still quite young, these years, when you're mid-20s to say 40, in any other time in history, you'd be a warrior. You'd be fighting, you'd be surviving, you'd be, as a man, masculine. And I feel that these are things that we can easily avoid in today's society. But I've kind of gone back to that mindset, that primitive mindset, and thought I can deal with these other things I was chasing. I can do that later. What I need to do now is I need to get myself ahead, and I need to really plant, the roots for my future. And that's kind of what I did. And I found that really did help me. And now I've got this, I'm back at work, I'm making money, I'm focused on my future and my career. When I'm off work, I can really relax and I can really go into those, I can go on that long walk and leave my phone at home and just kind of be. And I can do that without having this constant niggly worry about money.
Exactly.
So just kind of getting that balance. I love that. You start where you are.
Yeah.
You look at where you are. That could be everything: your demographic, your age, your situation. Do you have kids? Do you want kids? And once you start to kind of formulate this idea and stop looking at everyone else and chasing what everyone else wants, or what you think that they think that you want, and look at your own desires and start to accept that and admit that. I think that alone is such a powerful message and such a powerful place to start. So So yeah, man, I've got to say, what a conversation. It's been as good as I hoped, and I know you said you've only got an hour, so we're just about to go over. So did you want to shoot off now, or have you got a...
I'm good. That's a great place to just leave it. Yeah.
Brilliant. So do you mind just saying to my guests who are gonna, my viewers that are gonna watch the show, where they can find you and what you're up to, and sort of anything that you're sort of planning for in the near future?
Well, probably the best place to find me would be my YouTube channel. I don't know how to tell people to find that, but you'll probably provide a link, right? And I have a website. It's joeylott.com, joeylott.com. If people wanted to sign up for my email list, they're welcome to do that there. I don't send much email, so don't expect to get a lot of email from me, but it would be a way to stay in touch if they wanted to do that. And as far as what I've got planned, I don't know, just what I've been doing for now. I don't really have plans, to be honest. I trust that it happens as it needs to, and it does. So I'll be as surprised as everybody else to see what happens.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.